Welcome to the Best of MBS podcast, a collection of the best interviews hosted by Michael Bungay Stanier, best-selling author of The Coaching Habit and How to Begin. Today's interview is from the We Will Get Through This podcast. Here's your host, MBS.
When I think about somebody who has got herself connected and known in this world, the person I first think of is Dorie Clark. She has been a friend of mine forever. And I realize that's in part because of Dorie's gift of reaching out to people and going, hey, I'm Dorie Clark, let's hang out a little bit. And she came up to give a talk in Toronto some years ago. And she just said, hey, Michael, look, I kind of know who you are, but I don't really. Let's go and grab a meal together. So we did, and we hung out, and then we've become closer friends over time. When I'm in New York, I see her. When she's in Toronto, she sees me. We have a bunch of connected friends. And you know what? In terms of thinking about we will get through this podcast and thinking about how do you think about your own reputation, your own personal brand, I was like, there is nobody better than Dorie Clark. And let me read you why. She has been described by the New York Times, no less, as an expert in self-reinvention and helping others make changes in their lives. So that alone, that's pretty much, I could just drop a mic now, but I'm going to carry on. She's a frequent contributor to the Harvard Business Review, and you can download her Entrepreneurial You self-assessment workbook at dorieclark.com/entrepreneur. And I mention that because she is the author of numerous books. One of them is called Entrepreneurial You, which we might touch on today, but also Reinventing You and also Stand Out. And which was named the #1 leadership book of the year by Inc. magazine. She is one of the Thinkers 50 top thinkers in the world, which I'm slightly jealous of. She's been honored as the #1 communication coach in the world by the Marshall Goldsmith Leading Coaches Award, and one of the top 10 communication professionals in the world by Global Guru. So she is a woman of many talents, and I'm delighted to know her, be a friend of hers, and to have her on this podcast with me. So Dorie, come on down. Welcome.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so pleased to be the next contestant.
Exactly. Which box will you pick?
Always number 3.
Always number 3. Oh, that's the other thing you don't know about Dorie, which isn't on her kind of formal bio, is she's a stand-up comedian. In fact, she was an inspiration for me watching Dorie go, look, I'm going to do a little stand-up, to make me go and do a stand-up course a couple of years ago and trying that out. So Dorie's been influential in many, many ways in my life.
Thank you, Michael. Now the next step that I hope to inspire you on is writing musical theater. You think you're ready?
I love a good lyric. Like I'm lyrically inclined. So, I'm one of the few people my age, at least, who know many of the lyrics of Gilbert and Sullivan. but I've got not really a musical bone in my body. So, maybe I can play a small part in that, the musical theater piece.
There we go. We'll work on it together.
Excellent. So Dorie, one of the things you know about is this idea of reinventing yourself, standing out, building a personal brand. And I remember coming across the whole idea of personal brand, maybe 20 years ago with kind of Dan Pink and Tom Peters talking about it. But I'm not sure how that concept's changed or evolved, or even if it's still relevant. So when we talk about a personal brand, what do we even mean?
Well, essentially, your personal brand, and in some ways, the phrase is loaded for people. That some people get stressed out about it, or some people get their back up a little bit because they have these connotations of people having to be inauthentic or fake or selling themselves. But at its core, we're really just talking about your reputation. How do people see you? How do people talk about you? That is, I think, when we frame it that way, it becomes clearer to people why that actually might matter and be a useful thing to think about.
I think about that a little bit, and I'm like, you know what, my reputation's fine. It takes care of itself, and there's random people out there on the internet anyway, so who cares what they think about me? I was just looking at my TEDx talk this morning, and the most recent comment was, here's some advice, get a comb. I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't care about what you think about me, particularly, person, whoever you are. But why do we need to worry about our reputation and not just kind of let it take care of itself?
Well, ultimately, I think there's different spheres, right? For all of us, I mean, it is no secret that commenters on YouTube are not necessarily known to be a particularly thoughtful bunch. But
Thank
we
you.
all have people that we value their opinion. Your
Hmm.
professional colleagues, the folks that you hope might hire you, the folks that you hope might refer you, and within that sphere, it actually does matter what they think. Not in a junior high. Oh my gosh, I hope they think I'm cool. But just you want your work to be respected. I think that is the goal of almost
Okay.
any professional. You want people to take you seriously. You want when you say something, ideally for people to say, oh, Michael has good ideas. Let's hear what his take is. That is the ultimate compliment for a professional. It's the ultimate mark of success when people
Yeah.
don't hear your opinion and they say, wow, let's see what Michael has to say. I am eager to hear what Michael has to say. And if we can take steps to create the context in which that happens, and there are a few steps, right? First of all, they need to have heard of you. They need to know who you are in order to be able to seek out your opinion. And then
Yeah.
over time, we have to essentially train people to understand that, yes, you do have good ideas. You are worth listening to. If we can do that, it is very powerful because there's a lasting effect to it and it makes everything easier downstream. If you don't have to be constantly screaming, if you don't have to be begging with your hat in hand and saying, oh, please hire
Hmm.
me, please listen to me. If people are coming to you instead, then it just changes the entire dynamic.
There's a school of thought out there, summarized by the classic Field of Dreams quote, which is, if you build it, they will come. So you're like, you know what? My work will speak for itself. I don't need to self promote. I don't need to build my reputation. I'll just do good work. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I think it's true in a very micro sense that yes, the people immediately around you will know if you have done a good job. But
Hmm.
there's a few things that we have to keep in mind. Number one is that over the past 20 years, especially, we have increasingly had global relationships. You are often connecting with people, and it's never more true than now,
Yeah.
where they're connecting virtually, they're around the world. They may literally never even have met you in person, so it's not like they have the kind of depth of exposure where
Right.
oh yeah, I've been working in the same office with Michael for 20 years, he's great. It's a much lighter touch, and you're working with more people at a remove, and also there's faster turnover.
Yeah.
People are in different jobs, they're working on different teams, different projects, so they just don't have the same level exposure so that they really get a deep sense over time. So it is true in a broad sense that
Right.
yes, if you really do work with someone over a sustained period of time, they'll get it. But it's not a guarantee that that's going to be the case in a contemporary work environment. And for most of us, we probably have goals or aspirations of continuing to level up. We want, in theory,
Hmm.
to get promotions, or we want to be able to work on bigger projects or more important projects, or have higher priced clients or bigger name clients. There's something we're striving for. And if we had infinite time, the idea that your work would speak for itself is true, because there is a certain degree of virality. People can refer you, but mostly people know people like themselves.
Right.
And if you want to be trading up to continue to get better and better assignments, that's very hard because you have this kind of incremental growth, but it's really hard to have exponential growth. And that's why you need a strong brand, so that the word can spread faster to people that you don't already know, to people that your existing clients or your existing network don't already know, so that they can discover you and you can actually get the kind of work and projects that would be most exciting to you.
Part of what I really like that you're pointing to here, Dorie, is you're saying, and if you're listening to this, and I want you to make sure you're hearing this, building a personal brand and managing and actively managing your reputation isn't just a thing for a solopreneur or a freelancer or somebody aspiring to be a thought leader or an influencer, whatever language you want to use around that. Part of what Dorie's saying and mentioning frequently is, regardless of whether you work for yourself, you work for a small company, you work for a big organization, there's value to be had in terms of building your reputation and becoming known, particularly kind of beyond perhaps your immediate circle of people who go, actually, I've hung out with Dorie. She's a good person.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for pointing that out, Michael.
So if building it and hoping people come is not sufficient, where do I start, knowing that there's one part of me is going, look, I don't want this to be shallow or shouty or brittle or fake or inauthentic. I've got a kind of nervousness around that. Where would you guide me to as a kind of a first step around this to kind of make me feel good about, here's where you begin to think about how to build and establish your reputation, your brand?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first important starting points, and this is something I talk about in my book Stand Out and in the Recognized Expert course that I've developed, is that ultimately you need to start creating content. And I'm putting this in air quotes because what I really mean by is it almost doesn't matter how you are transmitting this content,
Mm-hmm.
but you need people to know what your ideas are. That is a prerequisite. The problem that a lot of professionals run into is that the only people who have any idea what your ideas are the people that literally you have worked with, which is a
Right.
relatively small number in this 7 billion person world, right? And so people, you can't be known for your ideas if people don't know what your ideas are. So you need to find a way for people who have not worked elbow to elbow with you to be able to hear what they are.
Right.
And it could be that you start writing and sharing them, blogging online or writing articles for publications. It could be that you do lunch and learns, when people are allowed to do that again, or maybe
Right.
you're sharing best practices on your company's internal social network. Maybe you are writing for your company's newsletter. Maybe you offer to do a free webinar for people inside your company about, hey, I learned this new sales technique that seems really effective. Let me share it with other people. Maybe you're, again, once there's conferences, maybe you're volunteering to speak at a conference and lead a
Right.
session. But somehow it is about sharing your ideas in a generous way so that people are made aware of them and so that they see, oh, wow, this person is adding something new to the discourse. There's something special here. Because, you can hear all you want. Oh, Michael's a great guy. Michael's awesome. Yeah, he's great. But there's no substance to
Which
that.
is true, by the way.
It is.
Except for the no substance bit. There is a tiny bit of substance here.
That's right. I mean, there's lots of people in the world who are good guys, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that like they're a leader in their field or you must hire them.
Yeah.
What you want to differentiate yourself in terms of your brand is to be known for your ideas, and sharing them somehow, finding the way that's right for you is a really powerful first step.
Okay, so there are some people freaking out right away, going, look, Dorie is a cornucopia of ideas. They're abundant. She's written in different spheres. She's written for HBR. She's written for assorted other magazines. She's written books. She has online courses. This woman is just good at that. And you know what? I'm also good at that. I'm great at kind of generating a concept and then kind of building that out. But if people are looking at you and me and going, look, I can't be a Dorie Clark, I can't be a Michael Bungay Stanier, how do you scale? Calm us down a bit, Dorie. Make that concept of start putting your ideas out in the world feel less scary for me.
So one example that I have that I love, this is actually from a friend of mine. So I often think that internal company social networks are a really underutilized resource.
Yes.
Because the truth is most employees think they're kind of lame, and so they don't participate as much as they should. I mean, it's a little different Slack, because sometimes companies are now mandating like, no, our communications are on Slack, so you have to do it. But for a long time, companies would have these internal social networks, and people would be like, why do I bother? Like, nobody's reading this, nobody cares. And so the thing was that management really wanted people to share. Wouldn't it be great if we could share best practices and connect as a company and capture our learning and all this kind of stuff? And so there was this kind of vacuum between what what the leaders wanted and what people were doing. And so I think that means there's kind of a blue ocean that can be exploited. But I had a friend who literally she was a retail clerk, frontline employee working at Burberry. And she was she was a pretty savvy person, and she was on the internal company social network, and they posted something about, hey, we have a sustainability challenge where we're looking for the best ideas about sustainability, from our employees, right? This is the kind of thing that I think a lot of people who are cynical would just write off and they'd say, oh, it's so stupid. What, why bother? But she actually took it seriously. She was very interested in environmental issues, and she did have some ideas. And she said, oh, well, maybe this is an opportunity. And so she wrote up a kind of, quick prospectus of what her idea was. And she sent it in and submitted it. And she ends up in a one-on-one dialogue with the company CEO.
That's awesome.
She ends up winning a contest. They fly her to the headquarters in London to present her idea. I mean, these are literal ways that you can stand out.
That's
and
nice.
Just a lot of people don't take that opportunity.
What I would say to people around the same piece is a few insights around that, which is, first of all, you don't need to have the full enchilada idea. A small idea is worthwhile sharing. Secondly, I would add to what Dorie's saying, which is look for your different channels, because there's a way that you can default to certain channels which may not play to your strengths. Like writing a book, for instance, is a miserable experience for almost everybody. And sometimes you go, the only way I put my ideas out in the world is to write a book. And I'm like, no, start small. Start with a video shot on your iPhone. Start with a small piece on your company intranet. All of that is great. And then the third thing I would offer up to people is to say this. The first time you start doing this, you're going to be a bit mediocre because here's the truth. Everybody is a bit mediocre the first time they start trying to put ideas together. It's a new skill. It's an underdeveloped muscle. And the real truth is that the first versions of the ideas that Dorie and I put out in the world are mediocre. I mean, just before I got on this call, I got a note back from Ainsley, who I work with at mbs.works, which is like, I've just read your newsletter. Yeah, I've got some comments. I'm like, okay, I don't know what those are yet, but what that is a moment of somebody going, let me help you elevate the idea that you've had. So it takes a degree of courage to step into this place of going, to be known for my ideas, I've got to start having ideas. And it's like, start small, know that you're going to suck, find ways of getting feedback so that maybe your idea can become a little stronger, a little more differentiated, a little more interesting. And then pick your channel, I think, can be really important as well.
Yes. Yeah. Very good tips. Thanks, Michael.
So, okay, I've got the I've got the first piece under my belt, which is like, okay, I'm going to start having ideas. I'm going to start finding ways of sharing them. Where do I go from here? Because there's a way that I could just be throwing stuff out in the world and nothing really sticks and nothing really elevates me or illuminates me. So is there another step as part of this?
Well, so the second step is asking the question, how can you stack the deck to make it a little bit more likely that people are going to listen and they are going to pay attention? Because of course it's true. There's lots of people blogging. I mean, it's better to blog than not to blog, but let's be real. There's a lot of people blogging.
Right.
And, for instance, so this is where the second part of my recognized expert framework comes into play, which is social proof. And that is a term used in psychology. And essentially what it refers to is what is your credibility that you are signaling or demonstrating to other people? Why should they take you seriously? And so one of the best things that we can do to make it more likely that people will be willing to listen to us in the first place is to try to amass credentials, and I will unpack credentials in a minute, to signal to people, oh, okay, well, this person probably does know what they're talking about. I probably should listen to this person.
Right.
And credentials can take a lot of forms. I mean, the obvious one that people think about is, oh, do I need a degree? Do I need a PhD or something like that? That's one form of credential, but it's certainly not the only one. I don't have a PhD. It could be credentials in the sense of this person has worked for these brand name companies that I've heard of. It
Hmm.
could be that this person is a leader in a professional association, which, hint, hint, these are volunteer positions. And so therefore often very easy to get because people don't like to
Exactly.
spend the time
Right.
volunteering. It could be that they're writing for a publication that people have heard about. It could be that they're speaking at a conference that, people have heard about or attend. It could be that you are a leader in your alumni association. It could even be, at sort of a local level, that you're the chair of a committee at work, you're the chair of the diversity committee, you're the chair of the
Right.
recycling committee. Whatever it is, that sort of leadership role gives you a certain amount of status that you can leverage.
And to the folks listening in, I would really encourage you to follow Dorie on LinkedIn, because what Dorie does brilliantly is constantly allow people to see her credentials in a way that doesn't feel like it's gratuitously self-promoting. And I think this is one of the things that you just get pitch perfect, Dorie. It's really impressive, which is, look, I know that you teach for Duke executive education, and I know that you travel around the world, or you did in recent times, speaking for different organizations. And I know that you are asked to endorse people's books all the time, because you're always holding up a book going, hey, my friend Michael has a new book out here and this is it, and it's a great book. There's a way that you're kind of generous with the way that you show up on LinkedIn, but it also has a subtle but consistent reinforcing of Dorie is a thought leader and an influencer in the space.
Thank you, my man. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I,
it's
I love the
masterful.
way that you put things out into the world too. It's one of the things that I really respect about you and your approach is you are always coming from a very thoughtful and generous place.
Thanks, Dorie. Um, you're building credentials, and the key message I want people to hear is, actually, this is really Dorie's ongoing message, I think, in building your reputation and your personal brand is there's a lots of small, easy steps you can take that make this feel less large, less big, less impossible. And when you're building credentials, it's like, look around you and find what the easy steps are, because once you get the easier credentials, then the next credentials are easier to get. When I started building my personal brand 20 years ago, I was like, okay, I'm a volunteer on my local coaching chapter. Okay,
Yes.
I've got, the first book endorsement I got was the buyer at the bookstore for the University of Toronto. And I'm like, okay, it's like nobody knows this person. I barely know this person. A friend of a friend introduced me. But I'm like, oh, okay, I've got that. And that's a stepping stone to then reaching out to somebody else, which is a stepping stone to reaching out to somebody else. So there's a way that you work a plan to accumulate credentials and kind of move up the ladder. So you get to a place where Dorie's like, I can get Marshall Goldsmith to endorse my book. I've been elected to Thinkers 50. I'm right for Harvard Business Review. I'm really kind of at the top of my game in terms of being illuminated by credentials that are of the highest caliber.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you raise a great point, Michael. I mean, for all of us, it looks depressing initially looking at people that have been doing things a lot longer than we have. We say, "Oh, it's so hard. I could never get there," and it seems really impossible. But it very much is the latter strategy. Everybody, I mean, unless you're coming in, unless you're sort of parachuting in from a different world where you just have a built-in advantage, like
Yeah,
you're a professional basketball player or something like
right.
that. For most sort of quote unquote regular people who are coming up, you start small, you start local. I mean, I remember in 2008, I won the Somerville, Massachusetts Small Business of the Year award. I mean,
Right.
that was like a big deal, and like it's just little things like that. I was constantly pushing to, to be getting something in my local paper and my local business journal.
Yeah.
I was, scrapping for placement in, the Massachusetts nonprofit network newsletter.
Exactly.
Just the little pieces like that do become the building blocks.
And Dorie, in fact, you mentioned, if you're parachuted in like an NBA basketball player, well, here's the truth with those people as well. They spend 20 years practicing basketball before they become an NBA player. So everybody has to start from nothing, start with 0 followers, start with 0 credentials and build up. And you do it one at a time.
Absolutely, yes.
So, Dorie, there are 3 steps in the recognized expert framework. We've got 2 of them. What's the third one?
The third one is network. And the reason...
No, not networking.
I know, I'm so sorry. Some people, like a sort of small subset of people are like, yes, that's amazing. And then a lot of people are just like, oh, God help us.
Right.
But, here's the truth. I work with a lot of coaching clients, and this is often a very hard thing for people because they either have sort of resistance to the idea of networking. It just feels weird. It feels uncomfortable. It feels sleazy, or they're just used to being a lone wolf. They're used to doing things on their own, and so they're like, but I don't need to. Why should I bother? But here's the basic idea. I mean, number one, I think we create. Just the way it gets talked about, it ends up creating a sort of bizarre false division between networking and actually just connecting with people. I mean, barring extreme examples, I think most people, if you said to them, hey, would you like to meet cool, interesting friends? I think they'd probably be like, yeah, that sounds good.
Exactly.
And that's basically what networking is. I mean, it doesn't have to be some stressful activity. We often equate networking with going to a quote unquote networking event, which are weird and artificial. And that's not a good way to network anyway. I totally avoid those. At its core, networking is just like, hey, make some friends, make some interesting friends who do what you do, and you can talk to them about it and it'll be fun. That is actually a fantastic thing. And most people, when they understand that's what we were talking about, they really enjoy it. But also, at a really fundamental level, you do begin to hit a wall sometimes because there are opportunities that, no matter how talented you are, there are opportunities that really only become available to you because somebody recommends you, or like it's like the job that's not advertised. You just wouldn't even know about it unless somebody told you about it. And so you do need to be plugged into those circles so that you can be part of it, so that you can be eligible. And that's an important part. Also, it's at a really basic level, it is very, very hard to be considered a leading light in a particular field if all the other people that are the leading lights of that field just have no idea who you are. You have to be part of the conversation.
As soon as you say that, you're like, well, of course.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell on you again, Dorie. One of the things that you do regularly is, and again, temporary hold whilst the pandemic sweeps the world, but you have been a great host for dinners in New York. When I'm in town, you'll pull together somewhere between 6 and 10 different people and go, right, let's go out for dinner. You pay your own way. You play the active role of a host and a gatherer. And again, I admire this because of how you find this sweet spot of saying, this builds my reputation. It builds my network. But I'm doing it in a spirit of generosity where I'm building other people's networks. So, just yesterday, there were a group of us who went out for dinner, which you hosted 2 months ago. And we just kind of reconnected on email going, hey, how you doing? And how's it going? And is everybody okay? And it was a perfect opportunity, an example of this is a way networking can look. And I am currently running something called Cocktails and Questions, where 2 or 3 times a week, I'll gather together a small group of people from my diverse circles and say, come and hang out and meet some cool new friends. And really, it's like inspired by you and some other people going, let me be a host in a way that gathers people. And also, there's a spin-off benefit for me around this. Builds my reputation and it builds my network.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love it that you're doing that, Michael.
Yeah, it's great. And plus I get to drink cocktails on a regular basis. So what's not to love here?
Yes. Yeah. One of the saving graces of the New York City lockdown is that they have temporarily, although, who knows with the recovery, they've at least temporarily given permission to restaurants to deliver cocktails.
That's
So,
awesome. I hadn't heard that, but that's
so I got
a smart move by
margaritas.
somebody.
Yeah, I got margaritas delivered the other night. It's like, hey, why not?
That's awesome. Hey, Dorie, this has been amazing. Thank you. What would you offer up as a kind of final thoughts, parting words?
Yeah, it's obviously a very challenging time right now,
Mm-hmm.
and people are just waiting to see what will happen. Everybody's in a bit of a state of paralysis as we try to see how things shake out, and so there are certain aspects of our businesses that are clearly not moving forward. We're not
Yes.
making travel plans. In many cases, clients are not buying anything because they don't necessarily know how much money they're going to have available to them.
Yep.
So the best thing that we can do is to really wrap our arms around the things that we can control
Right.
and use the time productively to say, you know what, let's reframe this. If this were a sabbatical, a lot of professionals are like, gosh, I wish I could take a month off. I wish I could
Right.
take a sabbatical. Well, what would you do with that sabbatical? Because
Right.
that is essentially what you've been granted. And so let's make the best of it. If your wish on your sabbatical was to eat out at restaurants every night, sadly, that probably won't happen.
Right.
But often what people will say they want to do with their sabbatical is they want to spend more time with their family, or they want to finally get cracking on writing that book, or
Exactly.
tackling that big project. And it's definitely a good time for that.
I love that. Dorie, for people who want to find out about your work, maybe get interested in the Recognized Expert framework, maybe pick up some of the freebie stuff that you've got, where will they find you?
Thank you so much, Michael. Well, one of the best places to start, actually, I have a free recognized expert self-assessment that I created where people can get a numerical score that helps them understand where they are in terms of becoming a recognized expert in their company or in their
Nice.
field. And it provides guidance based on that about where they should be spending their time
That's
right
perfect.
now. So they can get that for free at Dorie Clark. It's DorieClark. So DorieClark.com/toolkit.
Beautiful. Dorie, you are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. It's so great to get to speak with you. We hope you enjoyed this Best of MBS interview. Want more great content? Head to mbs.works. There you'll find MBS's new podcast, 2 Pages. You can learn about his best-selling books, and you can join the newsletter. That's mbs.works.
Hey, it's MBS here. If you've picked up a copy of my book, The Advice Trap, well, make sure you go to theadvicetrap.com. Not only is there a process for taming your advice monster, but there are downloads on how to ask a question powerfully well.